So we are very happy to have Dr. Kirk Hazen here from West Virginia University, and I'm going to read a little bit about him. So, he is the founding director of the West Virginia Dialect Project and a Benedum Distinguished Scholar in the Humanities. His research, teaching, and linguistic service are centered on social and linguistic patterns of language variation. He is the author of many books. His most recent is Introduction to Language, and he's also co-editor of Research Methods in Sociolinguistics, which was published by Wiley in 2014. And just to sort of situate his talk a little bit today, he's talking to us about Appalachian English, which is a variety that you might hear on this campus. And if you want to think about it, why it might be relevant to you or might be relevant to your peers, Stephanie Dunstan, in her dissertation a few years ago, looked at students who spoke this variety at a large southern university. And she found that those students reported feeling uncomfortable speaking in class. They felt more inclined to go to a different university where people might sound like them. So this is just one thing that I want you to think about as we're going through this. So he's going to fill us in on some of the more linguistic, technical aspects of that variety. So please give him a warm welcome.
Hey, thanks for coming out this Thursday afternoon. This is somewhat of a surreal experience for me. I did my graduate work here, so in lots of ways when I talk about what I've done over the last 20 years, this is the part where I grew up. This is where family was. So now coming back here, walking through Thompson Hall is just a mind-boggling experience. Because for me, that's where the intellectual check was. So it's fabulous to be back. I'm super excited. We got about 40 minutes today to talk. I have plenty of pictures and flashing lights and sound clips and video clips. If you break in at any time, any point in here and ask questions, it's not something where you should wait till the end. If we get off track and I have to swing around and do other stuff, that'd be great. It's really going to be about what questions you have. I'm a very limited expert in what kinds of things I know. But I'll try to answer any kind of questions you do have. All right? All right. Hey, what's my name? Kirk. There you go. Good. Okay, you got a question, just call off Kirk. So the idea here is that we're going to do a little overview of sociolinguistics, which, how many of you know have studied sociolinguistics? Just raise your hand. Raise them higher. Okay, some. Okay, cool. Some of the ideas of traditional variables from the past. Some of the continuing variation we find in Appalachia, a little bit of definition of what Appalachia is, and perhaps a little bit of what the future might hold in that part of the region. So sociolinguistics overall is number one, it's not a coherent field. It's a bunch of people who study language and society with very different methods. So it's a bunch of different fields that hang out together sometimes, but not always at the same conference. Sometimes they're very different. Basically, people started noticing the dialogue diversity in the 1960s, started noticing in very formal ways the social inequalities that were going on and continue to go on today, and then starting putting the two together in here. A lot of the study early on was on African American vernacular English. One of the things that came up was what's sort of called the first Longest controversy in 78-79 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Basically, Ann Arbor had a method of deciding who went into which first grade classroom, and it was a dialect kind of study. But it wasn't, it was just a language survey. So they said, they tested the kids, they gave them these verbal kinds of tests, and they sorted them. Lo and behold, all the African American students ended up in remedial class, and all of the European American students ended up in non-remedial class. There was a lawsuit that went on, and this was the first kind of Longest controversy. The second was in 96, 97. At the same time, a little bit later in the 1980s, American Speaking Hearing Association dealt with the concept of bidialectalism. For them, that essentially meant helping, in their terms, vernacular speaking students speak standard English. Some speech pathologists at the time saw this as correcting Black English to help them speak more standard. question of, is that an ethical thing to change someone's own variety? What does that imply? Is it wrong to sound Southern? Is it wrong to sound Black? Is it wrong to sound Appalachian? Is it stigmatized? Or is it? Appalachia itself, if you have a crystal clear definition of what it is, please let me know. No one else has it. The trouble with the term Appalachia is that there's so many different definitions in here. Where I am in West Virginia, actually for most of West Virginia, people do not self-identify as Appalachian. Paul Reed tells me that in places in Tennessee, in places in Kentucky, people do identify as Appalachian. This is the federal region. Why would there ever be a federal region? This is the region that gets money from the federal government for infrastructure, sewer lines, other kinds of projects in the communities. One of the biggest areas that gets money is down here in the Greenville-Spartanburg area, where people have no idea they're in Appalachia, but they get money for being in Appalachia. There are counties that are trying to get into Appalachia. They get money. So this is the reach of it. You don't have to be a dialect specialist to realize there is not one variety reaching down from Mississippi to New York. There's a huge range of speech patterns. So one thing we've done is we've ditched the term Appalachian English as a name. We go with Appalachia, we go with Appalachian English is, plural, word does not like that in spell check, so work with it, it's the same. There are many different varieties. So that's, if you take nothing else away, there's lots of different varieties in Appalachia. There's not one. But, we'll get to further definition. One of the reasons it was originally set up, the reason it was originally set up was the war on poverty, all those wars we have. And this war on poverty looked at these economically distressed regions. Some of these areas are still very distressed. Some of them have actually reached attainment in that way. And you can see they're concentrated. There's all kinds of other factors that play into the economics of it, but a lot of the original setup was economic. One of the things that plays into it is the high school completion rate in here, and it somewhat mirrors the economic attainment. This is from the Appalachian Regional Commission, actual federal unit, going through some transitions, as many things in the federal government are. So it's ARC, you can find their website, lots of maps, lots of data, downloadable data, spreadsheets, plugged into whatever statistical package you like. You all play with statistical packages, right? Yeah? You should do it. All right. So one of the assumptions about English in Appalachia, about many vernacular varieties, is that there's no system to how it works, which is of course not true because we're all human and we have that brain thing going on. And with that, that guarantees that everybody has a variety because we all have these mental parameters that do things, that have systems to them. Accordingly, there is an accent that everyone has, and it might be crafted out of a few different regional varieties, a few different ethnic varieties. It is a variety of cat. The term grammatical here essentially means that the patterns, the patterns that show up in that variety are systematic, and they're things that infants learn in the normal way that all children acquire language. And in doing that, it becomes part of what they're ready to do, which is very different from a notion of prescriptive grammar. All right. In what ways are varieties of English and Appalachian portrayed? One of the longest running ones are actually comic strips. And this one here, anybody know which one this is?
Snuffy Smith.
There you go. Snuffy Smith has been running for a very long time. It was originally named a different cartoon. Do you know what it was named?
I'm not that old.
It's actually flipped. Stuffy Smith came on the scene about 1934. Originally, as a character, it has been running since 1990. It was Barney Google, who was a sports writer out of Chicago, the cartoon character. It was falling off in popularity, only picked up in popularity when, in Barney Google's travels, ran into this hillbilly, Snuffy Smith. And once Snuffy Smith hit, then it became popular again. At that point, it was Barney Google and Snuffy Smith, and then Barney Google just hit. It was no longer popular, and you're off the set. Yeah, it was your cartoon. What you see are all kinds of representations of English. The one I want to point out here is the Y-O-R-E one. How would you say that?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you normally spell that word? Okay, so what is the difference in spelling supposed to tell you? That's where you provide an answer. What do you think? Why would there be a difference in spelling if they sound the same? Your and your.
Show lack of education.
And it shows that were these people writing this, there would be this lack of education, there would be this trouble with literacy. So it shows this social differentiation here in the spelling itself. What does that call all the teachers in the world? I dialects, right. So this kind of I dialect shows up in these kinds of cartoons to represent social status. All right. Hopefully we'll get some video here. This is from a documentary. I'll show it, then I'll tell you what it was from 1972. Whoa. I can plug this in, but then I'm going to have to go to,
Do you need to specify that your computer is outputting through HDMI and not something else?
yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, I'm Mrs. Bertie Powell of Cook Ranch Mountain.
Good job.
Bertie Powell of Cook Ranch Mountain. I've been down here about 41 years. I'm the mother of 6 children. And I went to grapevine school from the time I was 7 years old up till I went through the 8th grade. I couldn't go any further. I just had to go home and forget about my education. I was cutting off the mountain. There wasn't any bus out here for me to ride off. Out here on my farm, I own the farm out here on Cook Ranch Mountain, and I can raise my own garden, raise my own potatoes, and I can up about 1,000 cans of food each year. I raised 94 bushel potatoes last year in order to try to help support the family. And I did move off to town once and tried it down there about 2 months, and I just couldn't make it in there, and I had to move back to my own place, back in my mud hole. I know that there haven't been a child here on Coon Ranch Mountain that's ever graduated from grapevine school, or even up in the mountain at the high now, because they just taught down there from the 1st through the 5th, and from out here from the 1st through the 6th. So whenever a child started to school, they had to wade in mud, carry water, and then when they got big enough to go on through school, then they'd have to quit, come back home, lose their education. Nothing here in West Virginia, but the mines, from the doing the mines, is about worked out. I know the people out here on Phil Marsh Mountain can't help being poor, and I don't think we should be thrown back down to the dogs just like that we're just not God's people. They want to treat us just exactly like we're not God's people. We're all the same one. And we intention to make it one out here on this mountain, because we're all going to stick together on it to try to get a road and try to get a school for our children, because I know it's your form, and if one can have it, the other can.
So that road there was the issue that this documentary was made about. The folks in this community couldn't get their upcoming high school students to the high school because there was no bus that ran. So it was a fight with the state government. The Department of Transportation said, well, there's no bus on the road, so we don't need to pave the road. The Department of Education said, the road's not paved, we can't put a bus on the road. So for years, the state simply accepted that no one from that community would graduate from high school. So this was what it was like in some rural areas of West Virginia at the time. And you can hear a number of different features in there. Some of which we'll talk about, some of which we won't talk about. If you have questions, here are some things we will talk about. Variation between ing and in, theta versus f, them versus those, a few changes in pronouns, and was versus were classified. All right. This is one I suspect everyone notices. How many people have noticed before someone saying, I was walking? All right. It's one of the things that has been around in English for several centuries. What's it normally called?
G-dropping?
Yeah, it's normally called G-dropping out there. The interesting thing about that name is actually its variation between two kinds of nasal sounds. So the one kind of nasal sound, make do that. All right, then do this one. All right, this one here, the alveolar one, is a little further front, this one's a little further back. This is a variation between them. The reason why we have this kind of variation is this is an echo from the past. So if you're ever interested in languages, this is a great story to read about. This one variation here, as in I was walking, used to be a suffix that made things show progress, that it was going on at the time. This one here made verbs into nouns. And these were two separate suffixes. They did a great job. They were fine. They were happy. They had different forms. They were spelled different ways. Printing press came along. They got spelled the same. And then after that, everything got changed up. What we find for people in Appalachia, for the West Virginia folks I've studied, is there's huge variation between some folks who have all the time and some folks who barely ever have it. And this kind of variation correlates with some social factors, such as who has any experience past high school versus those who don't. Those with no college experience whatsoever, not even community college class, have higher rate than those who don't. One thing to note, it's not actually changing over time. You would expect that maybe there's something that would change. This one has been holding steady throughout the English-speaking world for centuries now. These two sounds in here. Here we have versus, go ahead and try that. Try this one here. And try this one. All right. To do this one, what do you got to do? What do you do to make the sound? Yeah, get the tongue between the teeth. It's a little bit dangerous to get that whole tongue between the teeth while actually getting the teeth going and moving. Accordingly, this thing is more rare as sounds go, and it's more likely to change thereby. You can see here some variation with theta f. Which word does the theta f variation show up? Birthday. And this is something that is found in other vernacular varieties of English, but it was a part of English in Appalachia for a long time. It's something that's actually faded over time as things go, but it still shows up in these kinds of cartoons. It's a natural bit of language change. It's one that actually other varieties have outside the US because it's a normal way for this to go. So here's a clip of this fella. Who's this fella? Yay! David Beckham, who's about to start up a mining club in MLS. So let's get a listen to David and his variation. This is a commercial, by the way. Adidas.
I was having death threats. I never felt safe for 3.5 years. I was having death threats. I never felt safe for 3.5 years.
So here's an Adidas commercial, internationally produced, worldwide distributed, and he has this variation between and it's not cut out, edited, or anything, because he did it. There's lots of variation around the world that may or may not be stigmatized, depending on who actually tweeted. Here's another one that actually has dropped off dramatically. Ing and in has held on. This variation, the them, has dropped off. What's going on? You have them instead of something like those in there. You might think that's a bit odd. Why would them be finding out with those? Those only came up around 1500 and actually had to fight for the spot to represent things further away and plural stuff. The variation of these things, called demonstratives, is all up in the air for its past history. It's not been very settled. We can see this, though, as part of a representation of the rural speech. Actually, rural speech up and down the East Coast, but rural speech in Appalachia. All kinds of things going on in here. First of all, we get the them, the demonstrative them, the title, but then you have the clothing, you have the moonshine jug, you have the bare feet, and the bare feet hurting. It's so bad that the local wildlife is laughing at them and their condition in there. A popular song. Previous days. It's something that was found in New England. You don't have to read all of this, but basically it was very dominant in New England because it was very dominant in the south part of England. Actually, it still is today in places like London. But it got associated with rural speakers in the U.S. and in the 20th century it just dropped off dramatically. So we find older speakers, speakers born before World War II, with higher rates of them, as in them boys, but then younger speakers really dropping off. Some pronouns that are changing in Appalachia, and these are totally connected to some of the changes in the rest of the U.S. South, are with these sets. Thou, thee, and thine. Anybody remember those? What did they do? What was their job? That's true. So what do they represent? What kind of people do they point out? Lots of people? Few people? Yeah, just one. Just one. It was just one. But it was just someone who wasn't you. So it was you, but it was just one you. Not multiple yous. It's a little confusing with the you thing. So, thou, thee, and thine were kicking along fine for quite a few centuries, and they got displaced. They got kicked off the island, they were voted. What took over was you, all the way across. That was a bit of a problem. Because then you had you, and then you had you. And it was confusing. So, what many varieties did after that point was try to fix the problem. That kind of confusion is a huge problem. Well, how do you fix that? you come up with other terms, like y'all, like yins, like you guys, which is what I grew up with, as plural for those other folk out there. And this is a way to fix that system. Let's take a look. This is a really small cartoon. I hope you can see this. This is earlier. This is actually Barney, Google, in this cartoon. But you can see here some variation with ya. You can see here some variation with yorn. What would yorn mean here? Some linguistic analysis for you. Not yorn.
They have to be plural, right?
Could be. Yeah, so it's the possessive into it, that the person owns it that way. And of course, it involves a draft and a nudist society, so that's it. But not related to the pronoun in the slightest. So in talking about these pronouns, and we'll take a look at yorn in just a bit. Again, there's all kinds of not just, oh, what does this pronoun do? What's its job? But the social reflections on it. How many people here are native y'all speakers? Grew up with y'all. Do you feel comfortable with y'all as a term? Good, good. Keep that up. I'm from Michigan. I picked it up when I came here. I actually came to South Carolina in '88, and I've tried to maintain it ever since. It's a fabulous program. But this is a speaker from southern West Virginia, 14 at the time, that had not lived in other places. Come on.
Got to stand where y'all. I say you guys. I can say y'all.
No, you don't say y'all, why not?
I just don't like that word.
I noticed you're changing a little bit.
No, where do you pick up you guys from?
That's what my word is. I don't say y'all. I can't stand it.
The kids now change their,
When did this come in? I want to hear about this.
the kids do it on purpose. They change the grammar, say y'all.
So,
I don't like y'all. Right?
now, do you consider yourself Southern?
Yeah.
But you don't want to use y'all?
Y'all come back right here. They did say that here. That's why they did.
So she's already picked up in her home community that somehow this is bad in southern West Virginia, and it marks her in a certain way. Living in a very rural area at the time. So what goes on with these pronouns? So this is one system here, and this is the yorn one. Take a look. This is showing what kinds of things. What jobs are these things doing? Yeah, they're showing possession. How do they show possession? They got this S over here, right? They just show S in every case except mine, which shows it in this other N form. So one way you can do it is you can flip it over, and language in general statement likes to have one form, one function. Just drive it through. We have this way of doing it. Let's just make this pattern all the time. It's cool that way. So it drives this through in some varieties and makes it so the N shows possession all the way through. That's what it does. Little kids come along and say, yeah, that's the way we do it. Yeah. And then they run with that from that point on. The other way to do it is just put that on. And some varieties go this way, where you have the S. S shows possession. That's fabulous. Let's throw the S on it everywhere we go. And that way, we have regularity in an actual systematic process. Now, these weird historical exceptions that no one knows why they're there, especially when people picking up are 1 and 2. They don't care about exceptions. Then we have this kind of system. One thing that comes up as actual criticisms of English and Appalachian is that you get phrases, get words like his self or their selves. Take a look at this. Take a look at what these do. We have your here, possessive, and then yourself. We have her, possessive, and herself. We have his, but then, what does him do? What's the job of that word? It's an object. So we throw the ball to him. Throw the ball to them and not there. So we have these irregularities. Language isn't always good with that. So sometimes what you get is this kind of regularization, your big word of the day, where it makes the system more regular and brings it across. Now, this is only seen as bad in any kind of way if the people actually using it are somehow socially seen as bad. It doesn't matter what linguistically is going on. It's the social part that the judgment comes from. So you get his selves and their selves, perfectly natural development in the language, and then it's bad if the people use it. Was and were, one of my favorites. I have hours of lectures about was and were if you're ever interested or have hours. But these two have been finding out for a very long time. There's different kinds. There's kinds where you have, there was 4 of them. What's up with that? Always fascinating. Yeah, that's fine. So instead of were, you have was here, except across North America, this is such a common feature now, sort of like French with il y a, being there is, there are. Does Spanish have that same thing going on?
Yep.
Yeah, that's really nice. I like that. This is where English is jumping on board finally, and getting this one feature to represent anything afterwards as just a frozen phrase up front. These two have been fighting out for a very long time because this form here was originally just this form with a suffix on it. Just had that plural suffix, and then there was a bit of sound change with the S and the R. This feature we're looking at is where we have "we was late last night," and that when it was level, meaning that you was in a regular way with every subject in there. This used to be something that was very common in the West Virginia region of Appalachia, but it's dropped off a lot after World War II, especially when you get to the 1980s, people born in the 1980s. So there's been a dramatic decline across that time. One thing that has actually picked up is the contraction of it, as in we's out late last night, and you have, instead of we was, we have we's, and that has actually picked up some, or at least it's become some kind of camouflage version. We find some differences between males and females, but overall it simply dropped compared to previous times. One thing that's going on is that the reach of standardized education across the entire U.S., but in Appalachia and West Virginia, has increased a lot since earlier times. So this is the percentage of the population, 25 or older, that has a high school degree. Now consider this. In 1940, we're looking at around 20% of the general population. Imagine how dramatic that is of a difference between now and then, and the push for some kind of post-secondary education. So one of the reasons why, especially after the World War II period, you have such a drop in some of these vernacular variants is because of this reach of education. So what kinds of things will show up in the future? Some of the vernacular features like was or demonstrative then will hold on, but in very small ways, and they become more marked for rural status. Some things are going to just be there and no one's going to notice. So here's one for you. How many people say these two words out loud? How many people have these two pronounced exactly the same? All right, raise and pride. Excellent. How many people here, this is traditionally a southern U.S. feature. How many people have, say this word? Cost. Say this one. Cost. All right. How many people have these two words pronounced the same? Yeah. I don't have either of them pronounced the same. Here's the point. This kind of change, and it's a change because that spelling represents different pronunciations back in the days. It's a change because nowadays so many people have these actually pronounced the same. This is widespread across the US in different regions, although expanding, and this one is expanding to some extent also. In West Virginia, it is the norm now, like many people here, to have both of these. This used to be Western Pennsylvania, this used to be just Southern, and these two have overlapped now for various reasons in West Virginia. So this kind of thing is becoming the norm for at least the West Virginia region of Appalachian, and I believe other areas also. Another thing that's coming up is this development of what are called quotatives, another word that spell checkers don't like, but is perfectly legit. This is where you have a verb that introduces a quote. Normally, in past decades, you had something like said, or tell, or yell. Sometimes you had zero forms. So you just have the introduction of the quote, the direct quote, and then it would go on and there'd be no verb to set it up. What's swept the English-speaking world, faster than possibly any other change in the history of English, has been the use of be and like to then introduce a quote. Have you heard this before? Yeah, because so many of you actually have this actually as a form. It has swept everywhere. In the US, it's seen as a feature of younger females. In Australia, it's working class males, right? What social status is actually varies from place to place, but it's a widespread phenomenon. So what's going on in West Virginia? It got picked up really quickly. This is the ordering of the speakers I interviewed by birth year. This is speakers born after 1960. This feature was introduced from California, oh Cali, like 1978, 79, got pushed out, and for speakers who were around 20 in 1980 period, they picked it up and everyone else picked it up afterwards. So just dramatic. Let's get this new word in here, let's get this new system in, introducing quotes, and it went from there. These, are, of course, are just the very cool brand names. But this feature is a little different from vernacular features like demonstrative them or was, which show that Southerners might have it more, or that working class speakers might have it more than upper middle class speakers. Here, it's females leading the way, but in West Virginia, females lead the way over Southern. And this feature is something driven more by more upper class speakers than working class speakers. So it's not working the same way as variation was. This one though, this is zero. This is where you introduce a quote with no verb. This seems to be the male counterpart to quotatives, at least in West Virginia for these speakers, where you find this larger divide of using them as the foil to quotative. Going to skip a bit of this. Basically, this is whether the L is actually pronounced as a consonant or more like a vowel. The story here, and I'll play an example. The main story here is the L used to be pronounced more like a vowel. Nowadays, it's more like a consonant. In the rest of the English-speaking world, it's actually going to be other. Most of this research, anything that you see here that looks fancy coming up, actually is from Robin Dodsworth here at NC State, who helped me with all of this. So all the cool stuff. Long sound? Nope. Long sound.
Everybody use a cow monitor and cow monitors. Everybody use a cow monitor and cow monitors. Everybody use a cow monitor and cow monitors. Everybody use a cow monitor and cow monitors.
I like blues. So basically, you have coal here with just vowel at the end. And this was a feature that is becoming more like a consonant. How do we know that? Thank you. Basically, just look here at the red line. The red line is in places in words like cold, where it comes at the end, and it over time has become more like a consonant. This is the turquoise line here, aqua line, is more like in light, where it's at the beginning of the word. So it's a bit of change. And this graph here is the Robin's set of tricks. Hopefully last one, and then we'll finish up. This is between words like which and which. Like cool whip, whip. Yeah, like that. If you notice, you have these spellings where some with a WH and some with a W. That's because this used to be as a sound, and this used to be as a sound. Try that. There you go. Try this one. There you go. These two spellings represent the differences in sound. These two have, like some of the vowels we mentioned before, merged over time. The thing to note is that there's no clear pattern. These are all the speakers. Higher means more, lower means more. Basically, that the W words here, like W-I-T-C-H, are actually more voiceless, more like than the W-H-I-C-H. There's huge variation. There's no clear pattern driving this. So it's pretty much a complete merger, and people are doing their own thing on the way. We're going to drop H drop in here.
Like you.
Thank you. This last one, just a note.
Like you.
This last one. In a word like B-U-G-S, how would you say B-U-G-S? All right. So the question is that final sound for you more like the S in Sue, or more like the Z in Zoo? Try it again. Say B-U-G-S. Is it more like the Z in Zoo? Okay. Didn't sound like. So here's what we found, at least in West Virginia, for this one way to measure what's going on. The final Z's actually had a huge range. These are the S's. These are the things like in cups. These are the ones internally here, internal to the word. But these are at the end. What we find is word finally, at least West Virginia, there is huge range of whether these things have any vocal fold vibrations or not. It's not something that's socially targeted in any way, but there is a lot of variation going on. The last one, there is a good bit of a change. Take a look at this one. Tell me what the variation might be. Fascinating. What's the variation that might be going on in here? Yeah! So that you have this instead of and. This is something that's been remarked in Appalachia for some time. It's not all that frequent, but it keeps coming up in all kinds of ways and places. And we had here just other examples. There's a lot going on here linguistically, but let's point this one out. This was the original form of this word. It was the only one. And then after a while, the N got dropped before consonant sounds in there. So you can see where it first starts to get dropped, but that was a new development. That was innovative to do that. Here, you start to see examples, and I'm sorry for the divide, but of the one without the N, believe it or not, that's a vowel, before vowels in there. So that started early on too. The idea is that with this change, the A and change, it very much follows what happened here with mine and mine. The original form of my used to be this mean form. And that was the only thing there. After a while, the N got dropped, and you had two forms doing one job. One thing languages don't like is to have two exact synonyms. Either one gets thrown out, or they get split and they do different jobs. But you would find variations like this, where it would still hold on in there because of falling down. There's all kinds of, there's a documentary coming out called, right now it's hillbillymovie.com is where it is. I'll spare you the site. But it should be coming out in another month or two that reviews stereotypes of Appalachia in the media over the last century. There's going to be a section of it on dialects that will be very worthwhile. But that's coming out. Last thing, this is a speaker from Kentucky. This is from a project done by teenagers during a summer camp, which is fabulous. The documentary is called Searching for an Appalachian Accent. And in here, the woman talks about what it's like interacting with folks who openly critique her variety of English.
I think it's important to pass down the traditions of speech and the way we say things, because that's where it came from my mom, and it came from her mom before that, and it came from my dad, and it came from his dad before that. And the reason, and I think that all the time we get, as I was saying before, a little more proper with the way we talk, that we're not as, probably not as easygoing with the way we say things, because we're not as comfortable as we used to be. And I think that's because we get in places where we're not used to. When people said those things, they were in always a comfortable situation with people that they knew. And now we find ourselves more and more in situations where we're not as comfortable with the people. We don't know the people, and it puts us in an uncomfortable situation. And we feel like we have to kind of sit up straight and kind of guide ourselves along so that we talk right and act right, and not embarrass ourselves or our family or anything. And as I was saying before, I think that's just fine as long as it doesn't become unnatural. And when it becomes unnatural, then to me it's not fine anymore. You have to accept me for how I am. You have to accept what I say, the way I say it.
So one of the key takeaways is that the linguistic patterns have history to them. Linguistic patterns have systematicity. They have rules and regulations for how they work. The social evaluation of English in Appalachia or any vernacular variety is a very different kind of creature, a very real creature. They're a very different kind of creature from the linguistic evaluation. There you go. Questions? Yes.
All right, so I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you know everyone up there says yins, and so I want to know, like, where that comes from. Like, I know, like, you're talking about G dropping, like, if that had anything to do with it, the I-N part.
So, as far as I've ever read, it's a descendant of Ewans down to Yins. I know further down in Pittsburgh, technically it's part of Appalachia, although, you know, they would never say that. But further down in Kentucky and the Smoky Mountains, you have Ewans as the dominant form. And then you all came in and took over. But yeah, I think it's a Ewans form that got then condensed down. And once it got sort of commodified in Pittsburgh, got put on t-shirts and cups and hats and books, and it's really commodified in Pittsburgh. Pittsburghese is a hot thing. Then it was said. And then you had people who could self-identify as Yinzers in there, right? Where'd you grow up in Pittsburgh?
Pierce Township.
Okay, all right. My mom's from Swiss Valley.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Do you think, like, is this kind of education in, like, English language, like, as a whole, like, dialects will, like, slowly disappear and eventually we'll just have one blended language for the whole area?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's all kinds of effects from standardized norms coming to local communities. The overall answer, though, is no. Because we, in our daily lives, are continuously taking variation and pushing in certain places, there's always going to be diversification. One of the things that's going on with English right now, in some ways English has been described as the Death Star language. It goes around and just zaps other languages and it destroys them economically. They can't compete with learning English in terms of making money. But because there's so many varieties of English around the world, and there are so many varieties of English around the world, those varieties are not heading in the same direction. They're growing in different directions. We are at the point now where these different varieties of English are on the verge of not being understandable amongst native speakers. It takes more work to get that job done. Another 100 years, we'll probably be there. Think about what happened to Latin, where you had the Roman Empire dominating an entire large region. They had to draw back, they had budget cuts and all kinds of troubles, but those varieties in France, in Spain, eventually didn't head the same direction. They had different directions in terms of what they were, and they became different languages. So there's going to be some coalescence in some places, but overall, for let's say English in the US is diversifying. It's becoming more different. In England itself, there's more diversity than what you have in the US, despite the geographic. So over time, you're going to get more diversity, despite that. Yeah? Yes?
Can you speak to the difference between YA''LL and Y''ALL? I grew up in West Virginia. And until I moved to North Carolina, I spelled it YA''LL. And when I moved down here, I learned that it needed to be spelled the other way.
You got told, right? Yeah, you got told. So, yeah, this one hurts me in so many ways. Because I feel like I want to have a strong opinion, and I do, but then I think I don't care, and I shouldn't care. So it all depends, the answer is it doesn't matter. It all depends on whether you think people are contracting the you to the all, or whether it's ya, and then with a in there. There was in that one, in the older Stuffy Smith cartoon with the giraffe, there was a ya form. And it used to be a form they got widely used. And that's one that took a nosedive pretty quickly. So it's just a matter of whether that form was still predominant in that area. But of course, spelling is such a conventional hodgepodge in the first place. Our spelled variety, the things you are writing right now, the things you read, the spellings are 500 years old. I think it's fabulous. You read that as history of English right there. But because of that, we're talking about very old English. So yeah, with that one, that's a newer one. And whatever. So it's definitely Y''ALL here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah.
Do you think like the opioid epidemic is affecting like the language in West Virginia at all?
In the most insidious ways, it's having an effect because so many people are actually dying or moving out of state. It is our state, West Virginia and Kentucky more so, but are doing better. But West Virginia is just starting to handle this. And anybody seen the recent report that in Williamson, West Virginia, which is down in the southern part, pill manufacturers, the legal pill manufacturers, shipped in 20 million pills, 6,000 for each person, to 2 pharmacies? I don't know how that's legal. But profits, right. Because of this kind of problem, and there's not a person in these areas in West Virginia that every single person knows someone who's died of this. There's all kinds of effects of population shifts from it. Is it having an effect in terms of social class shifts or other things? I don't know. We have a current project right now. We are looking at 8th and 9th grade in northern school in the rural and town, southern school in the rural and town. And one of the things we're sort of behind the seems, looking at it without asking, because IRB would really hurt us, is, you know, what effects is the community having from this kind of crisis? So I hope to find out more, but I don't know.
It's too early to tell.
Yeah, it's really the population in terms of, and people not moving in. So if anything, it's hurting the influx of people into the state. It's certainly hurting that. Because then we don't have, you can't move companies in because you don't have enough qualified workers, because there's such a rate of overdose deaths and other things. The health, I can tell you ERs are overwhelmed throughout West Virginia. So we have a shortage of nurses. So we are importing nurses left and right. So maybe that's going to be an effect. It's going to be the population shift of people moving down. And right now, West Virginia population is down. Our highest population ever was 1950. We had 2 million people. We are at 1.8. We are not going up. So if we had an increase, yeah, but we're not going to get an increase. 1.8 million.
That's the same as it was in the mid-80s.
Yeah, exactly.
It has not changed.
It has not changed. And if you take a look at who's there, you have young folk and you have senior citizens. And that middle-aged group who work for a living, they're gone to other states, paying those taxes, and then they come back to retirement. Because it's over, they're coming back. But we're missing that middle part. Wolfram and Christian, 1975 and 1976, had the same kind of effect. Cool, what else? Anything else? Cool, all right, that's great. Well, thank you for coming on.